Welcome, everyone, to today's program on the role of in-house counsel. This program is part of the Women's Leadership Initiative, and we are thrilled that all of you are able to join us today. Before I introduce our presenter, I wanted to go over a few Zoom housekeeping items. This presentation is best viewed in speaker mode. We will also be recording this session so that it can be viewed by all students at a later date. You have been muted upon entry, so please use the chat if you have any questions. I will be monitoring the chat and our speaker today encourages you to ask questions as they arise, and she would be happy to answer them throughout the program. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker and presenter, Erica Winkler. Erica is a member of the Albany Law School class of 2010. While at Albany, she was executive editor for lead articles for the Albany Law Review and graduated summa cum laude. She is currently senior counsel at Tapestry Incorporated, where she advises the global company on a variety of corporate, distribution, and general commercial issues. Previously, Erica was an M&A associate at the international firm of Freshfields, Bruckhaus, Derringer, US LLP, and completed a secondment in Switzerland with Novartis AG. Immediately after graduation, Erica worked for the City of New York's Office of Corporation Counsel in the Contracts and Real Estate Division. She received her undergraduate degree in political science from the University of Rochester in 2006. So please join me in welcoming Erica Winkler.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that, Joanne. It's always so interesting to kind of hear that list of experiences laid out like that. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I did do all those things. Man, where have all the years gone? But thank you, everybody, for spending your lunchtime with me. I really appreciate it. And as Joanne said, stop me, ask me questions, and I think it'll make this hopefully a little more user-friendly for you guys. So Lima, I'm going to try to drive here. I'm going to share my screen so you guys can all follow along with what we're doing here. Okay, so as Joanne mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit today about the role of in-house counsel. So I started my practice, as Joanne mentioned, in private practice at a couple of different firms, but have now for the last 3.5 years or so been with Tapestry, which is a global company, as Joanne mentioned, and it is a company that holds retail brands that you might be familiar with, so Coach, Kate Spade, Stuart Weitzman. And I'm going to walk through today kind of a few headline topics that I thought might be helpful. First, kind of how groups, counsel groups like mine are set up and how that differs based on the business that we're talking about and advising. Kind of some general ideas and thoughts and how I go about advising my business. Some common issues I come across, some common COVIDian issues I come across, because that's what everybody's talking about these days. A note, I was about to say a side note, but really not a side note anymore in these days on sustainability, something I've been focusing on in my work much more so recently. And then some kind of tips, tricks, keys that have been useful to me in my practice over the years. So let's see if I can do this. All right. Okay, so kind of first thoughts on structure of a corporate counsel. So some businesses are so small they don't actually have an in-house lawyer. But once you start to have the size and scale where you've got a lawyer in-house, the kind of permutations and possibilities of what your group looks like and what your group advises on are really endless. So, first, what really dictates the structure of your group is the reach of your business. Is your business a global business? Is your business just based in the US or North America? Or are you really local? Are you an Albany small business that's got enough, scale to have your own lawyer? So my business, Tapestry, is global, which means that there are a number of issues that we deal with at our headquarters in New York that really need to be looked at from a comprehensive viewpoint that touch our business no matter where we are in the world, and some are more local. So we've got specialists in China, in Singapore, in London, that really allow us to advise the people on the ground, the business people on the ground, on more local specific issues, as you can imagine, things like real estate, dealing with landlords, things like employment questions. We're obviously, our model is a very employee heavy business with all of the stores we have worldwide. So a lot of issues come up that really require somebody with particular knowledge on the ground to really dig into. That me sitting in New York, I don't have the specialty knowledge or the context, frankly, to really help that business with that issue. So how big is your business and where does it sit? So that'll kind of tell us where the lawyers sit. And the issues that your business is going to come to you with really vary depending on depending on your business. So are you public? Are you private? If you're a public company, that opens up a whole Pandora's box of topics that the in-house lawyer needs to be conversant in. Public disclosure, SEC issues, corporate governance, your board and your shareholder engagement. Those types of issues are much different depending on whether your business is public or private. But small or large, I think the rest of these issues really could touch many, if not most, businesses. So commercial agreements. Everybody you buy stuff from or sell stuff to, there's usually a contract. Everything from suppliers of your raw materials, if you're a business like ours that makes something, to social media platforms you may want to have marketing arrangements with, things like that. Data privacy, big one these days. So everything from privacy of the data for the employees that you have, making sure the information that they share with you as your employer is safe and you're keeping it safe, to information your customers might share with you, signing up for email blasts, things like that. How are you using that data? Are you keeping it safe? And then information that your vendors give you. They give you everything from bank account numbers to wire payments to, again, contact information. So how are you using that information and are you keeping it safe? That could be a whole any one of these actually could be a whole discussion. Intellectual property. A business like ours with brands, our intellectual property is obviously very valuable. How are we keeping it safe? Who do we let use it? How do we let them use it? What are the parameters of those relationships? Or if we're using someone else's IP, what are the rules of the road for us to do that? So if we do a collaboration with, we put Mickey Mouse on a handbag, what are the kind of rights and responsibilities between the parties to make that kind of arrangement happen? Employment and labor. Anytime you have an employee, obviously lots of issues come up there. Real estate. Do you own it? Do you lease it? If you lease it, what do those leases look like? A business like ours, again, we have lots of retail stores, so we have lots of landlords all over the world, especially we'll touch on this a little bit later, but in this COVIDian time, there's been lots of chatter and academic discussion about real estate issues and who should bear the risk when we're forced to shut down for health reasons like we're in right now. Sustainability, like I mentioned, businesses are increasingly focused on being good corporate citizens, and lots of issues and questions come up when you help your business think about those topics, and we'll talk about that more as well. And then everything else, specialty transactions, mergers and acquisitions. Are you buying another brand? Are you selling a brand? Are you any kind of one-off issue? We changed our name. Coach Inc. changed its name to Tapestry Inc. a couple of years back to reflect its multi-brand model. Lots of legal questions came up when we were doing that. Public or private, I mentioned. And then the last kind of question that you often think about when you look at the structure of a corporate counsel's office is your reliance on external counsel. Again, really driven by size in the first instance. If you're one or two lawyers helping a business, there are only so many hours in a day. So there may be certain matters that you need an outside lawyer to help you with, either that are routine or that are really high risk, and that might mean dollars, reputational risk that you need an outsider to just kind of have an objective, different viewpoint to help you through. So you get it right for your business. So now kind of moving on to how, now that we know kind of what our group looks like, we're all over the world, we handle, you know, a myriad of different issues. How do we actually answer the questions that our business people ask us all the time? And I was trying to be cheeky here and reference the idea that I'm sure everyone's familiar with of getting to yes, right? But I'm not sure I get to yes a whole lot. I get to okay a lot. And that is kind of from where I sit, the real, what really being an in-house lawyer boils down to. It's almost never black and white. It's almost never yes or no. It's all about figuring out a way to help your business do what it wants to do or needs to do in a way that kind of everybody can sleep comfortably at night with. So how do you do that? How do you kind of get to yes or okay? First, information is power. You need to really understand your business. That goes without saying. You need to understand what it means to be a business that makes something. You get, raw materials. What's your production like? How do you distribute your product? Where are you distributing your product? Are you online? Are you just in stores? You need to really understand how your business actually works, just kind of baseline in normal times. And then as questions come up, you've already got that foundational knowledge to serve as, the basis for the answer you're going to give. But then, as questions come up, you need to understand the actual goal. What is the business actually trying to achieve here? You need context. You need to understand timing. You need to understand cost restrictions. You need to understand if this is something they've done before or if it's not. Are you entering a new market? A new geography? You need to really kind of gather as much information as you can. And that leads you into kind of my second point here, which is gathering all that information will really help you in the back of your mind identify where the risks are. Ooh, this is a really high dollar problem. Or, ooh, man, if this goes wrong and all of our customer data is compromised, this is a really big reputational risk. Or, kind of it really will help you to identify where the big pitfalls are so you can think about where you need to focus your time and attention on creating a solution. Once you've identified those risks, I think my piece of advice here would be, again, getting back to my earlier point, the risk is almost never going to be zero in anything. You need to get comfortable with that as an in-house lawyer. Unless you're working at a law firm, you're not usually the driver of whatever decision is being made. You're trying to help your business accomplish its goal in the most responsible and productive and efficient way that it can. So understanding that in order to do that, there's no risk in anything. There's never zero risk in anything you do in life, and it's certainly true in advising a business. And then find the right balance. Get to a way that you can help your business accomplish its goal, but with making sure that you're not falling into one of those huge pitfalls. Making sure that the data is safe, making sure that if you need flexibility in terminating this relationship, that you can get out. If whatever kind of creative ways you can think of to soften or minimize the risks that you identified in your information gathering exercise, that's kind of really the main role of the in-house lawyer. And it goes without saying along the way, if there are novel questions, if there are really big questions of cost, timing, reputation, that's often when you say, okay, I may need some outside expert advice if it's not something that's kind of in our everyday running the business wheelhouse, and it might be prudent to solicit that advice. Common issues, I walked through these at the start. They're really driven by your business. If you are a business where you don't have any brick and mortar locations and you're just an e-commerce business, maybe you don't have any real estate issues. Maybe you have only a couple of employees, or maybe you have thousands. Maybe you handle a lot of data because you're an e-commerce business and people are sending you sensitive information that would be dangerous if it got into hands of someone it shouldn't be in, or is just used in a way that your customer did not consent to. You know, maybe you have data privacy issues, maybe you don't. Are you IP heavy or not? Again, are you a brand, or are you, I don't even, can't even think of a good example, because my in-house experience obviously is very brand and IP heavy, both here and at Novartis, the pharma company. I think commercial agreements are something you're going to have no matter what your business looks like. Again, anytime you buy something, use something, the best course of action is to kind of write down, obviously, the rules of the road to make sure everyone is getting the benefit of what they've bargained for. Regulatory compliance, I put down here at the end. You know, certain industries are regulated more heavily than others, right? You know, pharma is a perfect example. Very heavily regulated business. When you're advising a business like that, you know, it's important to understand the regulatory framework within which you're working. You know, similar with if you're advising a public company in the US, you know, being familiar with you know, the latest SEC guidance and disclosure requirements and reporting requirements and things like that are really important to make sure that you're helping your business follow all the rules that it needs to follow in order to run smoothly and correctly. And I think, you know, specialty transactions again, and I think what I'd like to say, just kind of as a headline on common issues, is almost nothing feels common, I find. You know, even if there are questions that come up for me, you know, time and time again, just context and time really can change the advice that I give, because it all goes into that mix, that stew of, you know, risk, appetite, context, what's my business trying to do. So common issues, while I can kind of put them in these buckets, which seems like just a list of every kind of question a business can ask, frankly, the answer is so driven by whatever the fact situation is at the time, which of course, you know, makes sense when you think about it, but is really something that I try to keep in the front of my mind. The answer isn't necessarily the same just because I've been asked the same question before. I think that's important for any efficient in-house lawyer to remember. COVID issues. So just a couple I wanted to flag that I'm sure you guys have come across in articles you've read or different, you know, seminars and things you've seen. I think for me, there are two big ones that I've been most interested in. They fall in the world of real estate and the world of commercial agreements. In real estate, you know, we're experiencing, you know, just retail in general is experiencing this phenomenon of having to shut its doors, its retail store doors for a period of time. You know, when you enter into a lease for a retail store, you don't necessarily think that that is going to happen. So there have been lots of articles of academics talking about these concepts of frustration of purpose. Is the purpose of the agreement that you've entered into frustrated by this pandemic? Impossibility. Is it actually impossible for the parties to realize the benefit, or the purpose of the agreement? Is it impossible for a party to perform if you can't, you know, go into your store? Force majeure. It's a law school exam concept, right? You think, I'm never going to think about force majeure in real life ever. I need to know that it's a boilerplate concept for Professor Sada's contract class. But it's something we've been talking about a lot. You know, is this, quote, an unforeseeable act of God? And if it is, and if you were smart enough to list epidemic, pandemic in your little laundry list of acts of God at the end of your contract, what kind of performance does it actually forgive? You know, if you look at a lot of force majeure provisions, as you know, you can read articles about, they often accept out the pure payment of money, and only other types of performance are quote, you know, forgiven in a force majeure situation. You know, so lots of questions about that. And in a lot of leases, I'm just speaking for, you know, in the lease context, you know, there are often requirements for stores to continually operate in a mall. So when you walk into a mall, it's not totally empty. You know, are those are provisions that people are thinking about a little bit more. And then, you know, this isn't really a real estate question, but just more of an operational question. You know, every jurisdiction government, it seems like, has different requirements for opening safely and healthily. Are there mask requirements, occupancy requirements? Are times of day where you can be open altered? Can you do curbside pickup of goods? Can you eat inside the restaurant or only outside? Things like that are questions that are coming up, and it's requiring the in-house lawyer to really stay abreast of all of the regulations that are frankly changing in real time in all the places that they exist. So it's an interesting time with a lot to think about in that world. And then on the commercial agreement side of the world, there are people are looking for, I think, again, you can read the articles on this, increased flexibility, termination rights. I think there's, depending on what side of the table you're on, you either want to lock in the other party or you want to be really flexible and be able to get out. So really kind of thinking long term, even though when people enter into agreements, even in your own personal life, when you enter into a lease, you think, oh, I'm going to love this apartment, I want to stay forever. Well, are you? I don't know. You need to make sure that you have the right level of flexibility that you need depending on the arrangement. Again, force majeure comes up again, just like I talked about in real estate. And then, yeah, just general flexibility, payment terms, termination, things like that. Just making sure that for whatever side of the table your business is on, that you are building in the flexibility that your business needs to adjust when things like epidemics and pandemics come and turn our worlds upside down. Sustainability. So this is one that's near and dear to my heart, and I think, frankly, is just going to increase in its importance. Certainly over the practice lives of the ladies on this call, but just generally. So I think sustainability, the way I think about it is, yes, crazy times happen, whether it's a pandemic or any other number of issues may be challenges to businesses, certain cycles in time. But I think consumers and employees are looking for businesses that speak to their values, where they have a commitment to something larger than them that is obviously flexible depending on what's going on in the world, but really still there's a steadfast commitment to values that again, employees and customers look toward. And I think what you're seeing, and certainly Tapestry is no exception, many companies are setting what are called ESG goals. So if you go on the website of your favorite brand or your favorite company, chances are that either them or their parent, like in the Tapestry scenario, are setting goals to hold themselves to these values. And ESG, in case you're not familiar, is environmental, social, and governance. It's this concept that we want to be and need to be good corporate citizens, both for our planet and our people, so we can take care of each other. And Tapestries, I encourage you to just do a little Google for yourself in your free time, which I'm sure you've got lots of, and look at our goals. So our program is called Our Social Fabric, and it focuses on these 3 pillars of our people, our planet, and our communities, and sets specific measurable goals in each of those 3 pillars to again make sure that we're doing our part for our planet and our people. And as far as my role as the lawyer, I think it's important the way I think of it in this situation and in a lot of situations, frankly, where there's not really technically a legal problem in a lot of these situations, but there just is a need for a critical thinker, problem solver, to make sure that we are being clear with what we're trying to accomplish. We're measuring properly. We are reporting out, to our shareholders and our investors and the world, what we're doing. We put out a report every year, in April or so, measuring and tracking the work that we've done in these areas. So making sure that we're communicating what we're doing, making sure that we are not running afoul of any other commitments that we've made. We're not running afoul of any agreements that we've entered into, that you know, there are certain multi-stakeholder initiatives that the industry is creating to help achieve some of these goals. Things, you know, are we going to join those initiatives? And not just me, but, you know, not just my company, but kind of generally, you know, making sure that if you make a commitment, you're sticking to it. So it's really not necessarily always a technical legal question on the table for the in-house lawyer in situations like sustainability and ESG. It's just keeping your business on track and focused and achieving what they say they're going to. But certainly when you get into the world of disclosure, and that is something that is developing, you know, in real time. There are institutional investors that are demanding companies disclose more data on what they're doing in the realm of ESG and standardizing that reporting. So stay tuned, I think, you know, on a lot of these points. And if it's something you care about, it's something that, you know, I think lawyers, in-house lawyers will be called upon more and more to advise on and help with. That's my 2 cents on sustainability. It's one of those things that even in COVIDian times, we need to keep our eye on the ball for those issues. So keys to success. So kind of summary, when I sit back and I think of when I do my job best, what did I do? How am I doing it? And again, it gets back to what I talked about at the beginning. I think, you know, the best in-house lawyers know their business inside and out. They read the, you know, they read the reports, you know, the operating reports that are filed publicly with the SEC. They read the policies and procedures on their website. But beyond that, you know, anybody can do that. They really kind of dig down and ask questions and get to know their business people, and they understand how those people do their jobs, the challenges they face, the holes that they feel, the needs that they have, to really, again, be able to most holistically answer the question that's being asked of the in-house lawyer. You know, the best career advice I ever got, I actually got from my mother, and it's just rung so true, is, you know, essentially it's, don't be afraid to say I don't know. And as long as you figure it out and you come back. And I think that's, business people appreciate that so much when you say, geez, I hear your question, I don't know the answer, but let me get back to you, and you investigate and you follow up and you ask more questions and you show your investment in their need. And then, you know, that just begets further good results, because oftentimes if you serve your business in that way, they will come to you before there are problems in the future, instead of having to kind of clean up at the back end, which, you know, no lawyer ever wants to do. Flexibility is critical. Again, goes back to my point of, I may have been asked this question before, but it's a different day and the answer might be different given, you know, the challenges and needs that my business has that day. Establishing your risk tolerance. You got to have some. It can't be zero, unless, you know, maybe it can be, but I've not ever had a job where my risk tolerance can be zero. You get comfortable with the uneasy, you get comfortable with forming a judgment and taking a position based on the information that you have and your kind of best sense and best judgment, given that big picture. And that's really your role. It's not perfection all the time. It's efficiency and getting your business where it needs to be, or where it wants to be. These last few points I think are really important to me as well. In my personal experience, you need to stay true to yourself and your style. You need to figure out what kind of lawyer you want to be, what kind of advisor you want to be. I think for me, that means making sure that my business people feel like they can come to me with any question. And oftentimes that makes them, that prevents problems, like I was saying earlier. So making sure that, you know, I'm growing relationships, people feel like they can come to me, not just as their lawyer, but as a person in their business that's going to help them get where they want to go. Develop that global perspective. Even if you're in a business that is is just here at home, you know, and doesn't have that wider reach yet, I think we're kidding ourselves if you don't look outside of your box to see if there are other solutions, if someone's done it better or different. You're not advising your business in the best way that you can if you're not looking outside of yourself into the broader world or industry. And then push yourself. To that point about my mother's advice, you know, it's okay to say you don't know. I say I don't know all the time, because unless you're in a company where there are a bajillion lawyers and you've got a very specific role and your role is very predictable, which, you know, more power to you, that's great. That's not, as has never been the practices that I've been in. So you need to get comfortable having a question come across your desk that you've never seen before in an area you've never seen. I get asked questions about insurance or, you know, stock exchange questions, things that I've never thought about before that weren't in my historical practice, you know, that I need to learn and develop a knowledge base on and be conversant in as time goes. And just a point on that, I can't do that unless I have a network of relationships of people that I trust and can depend on and call when I get a question that I don't know what the heck it is. And I can say, oh my gosh, I know you do this. Can you help me understand, you know, or where to start? And that means in my business, it means old colleagues, it means old professors, it means anybody who you might tap into. You know, a network is not just to be used when you're looking for a job. It's to be, in my experience, and I'm learning this in real time, it's to be used, you know, along the way to make sure that you're constantly developing even as a practitioner. And I guess that's kind of it. So I hope that was helpful to you. You know, I should have said this at the beginning. Obviously, this was all based on my experience. This isn't, you know, a reflection of, you know, of my company or my business. This is just kind of thoughts that I think have helped me along the way, and issues that I see being important to you know, I think mostly students and or early practitioners as you guys develop your careers. So with that, I'm happy to expound on anything, answer any questions, whatever is most helpful to you guys.
Thank you so much, Erica. I do encourage anyone to ask a question. You can take yourself off mute right now. There's nothing in the chat, but I know Erica said she'd be happy to answer any questions.
Don't be shy. Are there any? Yes.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you a question, but there's a question in the chat, so I'll read that first and I'll hold my question.
Sure.
So the question in the chat is there such a thing as a typical day for you?
Yeah. A typical day, there is, but it's more kind of how I structure my day. And again, flexibility is paramount when you're an in-house lawyer. You know, you can have any number of things happen overnight, especially when you're in a global business like mine. But what I usually do in my typical day is kind of wake up, because I advise and help business partners and lawyer colleagues in Asia. I get up, I try to address those questions first, and make sure that before those colleagues go to bed that I understand what they need so I can progress it over the course of my day. So just structurally, I try to gauge what I triage based on time zone. But as far as substantively what any typical day looks like, you know, I think for me what's important is making sure that I, even when there are fire drills, which happen, and they happen every day, that I make sure that I'm doing my best to keep the underlying business issues progressing and running. Because if you're only ever focusing on the big problem, then your colleagues in the business that are depending on you to actually get their everyday job done are going to be irritated. They're not going to come with you. It's going to hurt those relationships like I was talking about. So it's really finding the right balance of addressing whatever fire drill nightmare has happened that minute, with keeping the rest of the work moving. And I find that in the more open and honest that I am with my business partners about timing challenges, shifts, reprioritization, things like that, People are really generous. They're really understanding. The same thing happens in their job. If you say, hey, I know I told you I was going to get you this by the end of the week, but I just can't, they'll understand. Now, you can't necessarily do that on day one of your job. You need to kind of develop a reputation of you're someone to be counted on, and you do what you say you'll do. But kind of once you do that, I think that's critical to managing the inevitable crazy days that come, if that helps.
Thank you, Erica. I did notice we do have 2 hands raised. Doris Gamma and Dean Queenan. Doris, would you like to start with your question, and then we'll move over to Dean Queenan?
Dean Queenan, I know that name.
Hi, Erica.
Hi.
You go first.
Okay, thank you. I just had a question. In the beginning, you mentioned that it seems like you have to be pretty well-rounded, right? To kind of know a little bit of everything to be in-house counsel. So with that being said, before you got this job, is this something that employers look at? They want to make sure that in the past, in your past experience, you kind of have done a little bit of everything, or how do you stand out to kind of gain this role?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I get that question a lot from people who say, I want to apply for this job, but I've only done, M&A, and this job that I'm applying for requires these other 3 things. Well, first of all, I think that is a really common fear, and don't be afraid of that. I think there are ways to get kind of through that hurdle. First of all, no employer, it's not reasonable for an employer to expect that you've had every experience under the sun, especially when you're at, the earlier stage of your career. If you're applying to be the general counsel of a Fortune 500, yeah, you need to have a wide range of experience actually under your belt. But if you're looking to have a job kind of like mine, right, where I am describing a whole laundry list of issues that come across my desk, you have to start somewhere. I think, and I'm speaking again from my experience, being in private practice, and particularly in the private practice that I was in, mergers and acquisitions, was a really good foundation building practice for me. I always knew that I wanted to be this kind of advisor, a more general business type of advisor, as opposed to a really technical specialist in one area. And being an M&A lawyer, you're doing these deals, and in the course of due diligence or drafting your purchase agreements, things like that, you need to build vocabulary and be conversant in real estate, labor and employment, IP, general commercial. You need to know how, board governance works, things like that. So you're kind of gaining that base. And I might not have advised on, all the nitty gritty little things that I'm doing now in this job in my past life, but I definitely was building my vocabulary, was building my critical thinking brain. And if there were real gaps that I knew that I cared about, like in sustainability or things like that, I read and I talked to people and I met people, and I tried to build it that way. So that's a very long way to say, there's no way that you can get all this experience in year 1, 2, 3, 4 of being a lawyer. I'm in year 10, believe it or not. But there are ways to kind of keep moving down that path. And then you'll be shocked when you sit down 10 years from now. I don't know if you're graduating or you just graduated, but when you sit down 10 years from now and you go, oh, I can actually at least confidently figure out where to start with a question and then go from there, even if it's some crazy thing that I've never heard of before. But employers, just to get back to your, I think, hopefully what was the crux of your question is, don't be afraid to apply for something or put yourself out there for a role that you think you can actually do a good job at and you want, just because you only tick 4 of the 10 boxes. First of all, there's no harm in stretching yourself, and you should allow, I think, employers to get to know all the other things about you, your eagerness to learn, your relationship development, your commitment to stretching yourself and being flexible. Let those things shine if you think that maybe your substantive expertise is not there on all 10 buckets, because you'll get there and you can look anything up. That's not the important part. It's about having good judgment and continuing to learn.
Thank you so much.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Erica. And I know Dean Queenan has a question, and we did have a question the chat from Ming Hong, but I believe you answered that. They had asked if there's any specific legal background requirement for applying to a position in counsel, such as some law firm experience for certain years. So
Yeah, I think, look, I get asked that a lot too. I think if you've, and this assumes that you've got choices when you leave school. You know, the reality is the job market is crazy. I mean, I graduated in 2010. When I was coming out, the job market was super challenged, and you have to do what you have to do, and it might not be your perfect job, but assuming you've got all the options in the world, being in private practice was great for me. Again, to hone that really kind of technical, substantive knowledge, just and serve a lot of different clients. And now I serve one client. You know, to serve a lot of different clients, have a lot of different bosses, and develop my own style. And then once I figured out the type of lawyer I wanted to be and the type of work I wanted to do, then I can kind of narrow myself. But if you have the opportunity, I think private practice is just such a valuable kind of, I call it law school part 2 to start at. But hey, if you can't, take what you can get and make the best of it, and show them how great you are at whatever situation you found yourself in, and keep your eyes peeled for the next best thing.
great advice. Dean Queenan?
So I do have a little question, but I really want to just say hi to Erica.
Hi.
Those of you that didn't get to meet Erica when she was a student, she is a true star, a total rock star, and it just warms my heart to hear about all of her success. And so she's an amazing person and an amazing lawyer. And so nice to see you. Thank you for doing this. So the question I had, maybe you could just share with everyone, because it is rare and hard to move into an in-house position really as quickly as you did, but certainly right out of law school, right? So were there any challenges when you transitioned from private practice to in-house?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I didn't appreciate, I had been warned how challenging it would be. But every warning that I got definitely came true. I think we forget, right? We're on this call with lawyers, and we have a very specific way of speaking to each other and vocabulary that we use, and ways that we think that almost turn into a shorthand we use amongst ourselves. When you're at a law firm, especially at a junior level, you're very rarely talking to the client, or you're talking to the client, or you're talking to the lawyer at the client. So you're almost always talking to other lawyers, where the way we speak is natural and comfortable. You're talking to other lawyers, and oftentimes their risk tolerance is usually pretty low. And what factors into that calculus is usually kind of the same elements or components. So it's an easier communication style and thought process. When you're now thrown into a business, I rarely talk to other lawyers. I'm often the only lawyer on a matter or on a question. And at first, that transition in style and communication style and explaining how I got to my answer was very challenging, because I guess had lost sight of the fact that these people are trained in completely different skills. And I am on a team now where I'm the only person talking this way and thinking this way, and that's the value that I bring to that team. So adjusting that mindset of how to communicate to other lawyers, to communicating to business people who couldn't give two craps about what the force majeure provision says, was kind of jarring. And I thought, oh my God, am I even speaking the same language as these people? And it just takes a little while to be able to translate my lawyer brain into my business person brain. And so that was the biggest challenge for me. And then that whole concept of strengthening your stomach, getting a risk tolerance, man, we want to make sure everybody understands every risk and every cost and every unknown. But if you focus on all that stuff, you're never going to have a handbag in a store. So you got to kind of like get over that. So kind of, putting my shoulders back and making sure that everybody understood the big risks as you see them. But then being okay with them when they say, I understand this might cost me X number of dollars and it might be harder if this thing goes wrong, but I have to do it for my business. And then moving on. Those are the two challenges.
And great advice. And I love your advice about networking. Like we talk about networking all the time, and you probably remember this from your law school days, but it's so true that it's important on multiple levels, right? Not just to get a job, but also to call someone. And when you have to acknowledge that you don't know everything about everything, it's good to have a network you can trust.
Absolutely. And Professor Queen, I have to say, Dean Queenan, all the nice things that you said could absolutely be flipped on their head. I think that, you know, I think that the class I took with you, lawyering, really that's the whole crux of it, right? I mean, you can look up any substantive question. I can look up what, you know, quiet enjoyment means, but to be able to communicate your thoughts in a way that is persuasive and productive is a whole other skill, and you definitely helped me figure out how to do that. So thank you.
Thanks, Erica. We miss you. It's nice to see.
Well, I'm not far, it turns out, these days.
I know. See, this COVID has some silver linings.
It sure does.
Oh, thank you, Dean Queenan. Dean Fitzpatrick, did you have a question, or was it answered throughout the other questions?
Well, all of our student questions were so good that mine was answered. But I'm curious about one thing, Erica. You mentioned that you graduated in 2010 and circumstances were less than ideal for finding your dream job. And you landed up, I think, at Counsel. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how that job, although it wasn't your first choice, prepared you for your next steps?
Oh, yeah, I mean, absolutely. So that's a perfect example. So just kind of for context, I graduated in 2010. So my second year summer, I was a summer associate at a big firm in New York called Dewey and LaBeouf. You know, I was one of 100+ summer associate interns that year. But geez, by the time winter came around, you know, I had been told along with my class that, you know, we need to find a public interest job and go away until kind of the market came back and there was actually work for us. So I was looking for a job again, and I didn't have any expectation of doing that. So I found my way to the city because a number of smart people who I knew and respected said, man, it is an absolute fantastic training ground. So that's the way I really looked at it. I knew that I wanted to go into private practice, but I really tried to focus on all the good things that experience had, and any that I thought they'd have, they were kind of tenfold. Some of the smartest people and smartest practitioners I've ever worked with and for worked for that agency at the city. They had to deal with, and they're in-house counsel for the city of New York. Same questions I'm talking about here, of novel questions, of facts matter, of needing to get to yes or okay, because you got to keep the business of the city moving. Developing a risk tolerance, all of that, resource constraints, talk about resource constraints, dollars, time, otherwise. I mean, all the same concerns there that kind of you feel in a business later on. So really, I would say if you found yourself in a position where you didn't think you'd be or isn't ideal, there are, I can promise you, translatable nuggets to take with you along the way. And gosh, even the jobs that I've liked the least in the last 10 years, I've learned a heck of a lot from. But it's all about don't get mired down in the details, try to see the bigger picture. And you know, again, it's a networking question too. You know, you look around, you say, oh, these are smart people. You know, what can I learn from them, either professionally or personally or substantively? But time is too valuable. Try not to view any opportunity as too unideal. That would be my 2 cents. But it was hard. It was very stressful. I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate. Even after I was at the city, which was an excellent experience, I can't say enough. And actually, a colleague of mine now was a litigator for the city of New York for a number of years. And man, she will not waste 1 second to tell you how great of an experience that was for her, how much she learned. But it was very, very stressful. And for me in certain situations, but also to see my classmates having to make decisions that they didn't want to make. It was a very hard time. I think you need to be very patient with yourself, very gentle, and really develop that network, because you never know when the heck you're going to need it. And I've really needed it a couple of times along the way. And if it wasn't there, I might not be sitting here.
Thank you so much, Erica, for sharing.
Sure. And it goes without saying, I mean, I've included my contact information here. If you feel uncomfortable, that's my work email address, obviously. But if you would prefer to send me a message on LinkedIn, you know, I'm really happy to help, you know, answer a question you might not want to ask to this broader group, or give 2 cents on anything else. I'm happy to.
Thank you, Erica. And I know that Erica means that, because I think I have her on speed dial these days.
That's all right. That's okay.
Always answering all my questions, and always willing to help out students. And we appreciate that so much.
Yeah, it's important. It's
Are
important.
there any other questions before we say goodbye to our speaker? Okay. Well,
If there are not, I mean, Joanne, thank you so much. This was first of all fun. I like seeing all your faces so much. It's I know I've said this to Joanne a number of times, but I still very much look forward to the day to kind of meet you guys in person and have a drink and share experiences. Not on a Zoom, but in the meantime, really great faces, even in these little boxes.
we feel the same exact way, Erica. We're definitely looking forward to that day. And thank you so much for taking the time. This was great. We really appreciate it. And we wish you health and stay safe. And hopefully we will see you soon.
Yes, you as well. And best of luck to everybody on the phone who is still in school and or looking for a job or doing anything else, really. Best of luck. Thanks again.
Bye, Erica.
Thank you, Erica.
Bye. Thank you.